Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. It is 1:30 on Wednesday, January 18th. I am at the corner of St. Clair Avenue and Spadina Road, and I am heading southbound on Spadina. Today's walk is sort of sentimental. I'm reminiscing because 34 years ago this month I moved to Toronto from Calgary, and when I arrived about 5:30 in the evening on the 12th of January. So it was blackout. It was hard to tell. Hard to tell what it was. What it was like outside, I guess, other than being dark and cold. I'm pretty sure there was snow on the ground. Anyhow, when I woke up the next morning, I was staying with a friend who actually lived in this Casa Loma neighbourhood. When I woke up the next morning, it looked like this. It was very gray. And I'm doing a Casa Loma, I guess, perimeter walk, the boundaries of the Casa Loma neighborhood. Because as I mentioned, when I first came here, I stayed with a friend who lived in the Casa Loma neighborhood. So it's just a pilgrimage back to where I stayed when I first moved to Toronto. So I stayed with my friend and her husband, and I think there was only one child at the time. I stayed with them for a week. I was supposed to stay a little bit longer, but I just wanted to get out. Wasn't really fond of her husband. So we just actually passed through Winston Churchill Park, is where the camera is angling. And this could be part of the park. This is the dog park just down here. And look at all those pups down there having such a good time. Let's see if we can get a better shot, or better view rather, of those little monkeys. Yeah, they seem to be having fun down there. I think that's like sand, not dirt. That is on the ground. Yeah, it looks like sand to me. What a nice dog park. So I stayed with her for a week. I was supposed to stay a little bit longer until I could secure an apartment, but I ended up moving out after a week and staying with a relative of my friend. So I stayed in the basement. It was like a basement apartment, actually. It was pretty good. So I stayed there for 6 weeks until the apartment that I eventually secured became available for me to move into. So I think I moved into my apartment, which happened to be on Broadway Avenue. I do have a Broadway Avenue video. If I remember, I'll try and link it here. Yeah, so where I stayed after I left my friend's house, that was here in the Casa Loma neighborhood. And this is Nordheimer Ravine, right across the way here. And that's probably part of where the dog park is probably considered part of the ravine versus Sir Winston Churchill Park. So when I moved out of my friend's place after a week, and I lived for 6 weeks in a basement apartment, and that was near Centrepoint Mall at Steeles and Yonge. Wowza. That vehicle is going fast. Hope everything is okay. So I lived up, as I mentioned, Steeles, and literally the Steeles and Yonge. And I used to visit Centrepoint Mall quite a bit because that was the only sort of public place. I didn't know anybody except for my friend, and she lived down here. So, I could buy all my groceries at Centrepoint Mall, and I bought my first TV in Centrepoint Mall. But today I thought, just to celebrate 34 years in Toronto, to do this Casa Loma boundary walk. So it goes from, according to Google, Casa Loma. The Casa Loma neighbourhood starts at Spadina and St. Clair, south on Spadina. I have to go right beside Casa Loma, down the Baldwin Steps, and then continue south to where Spadina meets the train tracks, and then I need to walk west along the train tracks, not on the train tracks obviously, but I guess the nearest street, and then turn north on Bathurst, and then across Spadina back to where we started. Perfect day for a walk. I love these overcast days. I think I tend to mention that every time it's an overcast day and I'm out recording. I just love these days. It just seems the city is calmer. Although I love the energy of Toronto, but these days are just, to me, very peaceful. And I enjoy both the peacefulness of these overcast days and how I see the city to be quiet and calm. I also enjoy the vibrant busyness of the city as well. And here we are ascending upon Spadina Museum. I took you guys here on the Spadina house tour this past spring, I think April. So I recorded here in the Spadina House Museum. If you recall, this is probably familiar to you. And the stables are just further down on Austion Terrace, and then it turns up just where that person is crossing the street going south, if you can see, right where that black SUV is passing. So just up that street is the stables. And here is beautiful Casa Loma. Let's see if we can get a better angle. So the neighborhood of Casa Loma was named after, obviously, the castle. It's a Gothic, according to Google, it's a Gothic revival mansion built by Sir Henry Pellet. It was constructed in the early 1900s for, at the time, around $3 million. That was expensive by today's standards, but considerably more expensive back in the early 1900s. And then it It ended up being managed and owned by the city due to tax problems. So the owner couldn't afford to, I don't know if he couldn't afford to continue paying for it, or it was just a tax issue he couldn't pay for. And inside the castle there is a restaurant called Blue Bloods. It's pretty bougie, very pricey. It's also considered a wedding venue. And I don't know if you're able to see, but where those lights are, you can see that cement section sort of protruding from the castle itself. That is, I think, not the gardens, but it's an atrium, and there's flowers sort of around the perimeter and the inside. And sometimes there are concerts, what am I trying to say here? Like trios, orchestra trios that perform in there, and other things that take place in there. Wedding ceremonies take place there. And then there's also large rooms for wedding receptions as well. So it's quite lovely inside. And hopefully you can see this is looking south down Spadina. You can see the train tracks, so that's where I'm going to need to turn going west. Now I'm going to try something here. I'm going to see if I can zoom, because as you know, I've been having challenges with this. No, go up maybe. No, go down. Down? Nope. No, can't do it. I don't want to mess around with this and waste your time. So these steps that I'm going down on, these are called the Baldwin Steps. Much easier going down than coming up these steps. And sometimes, not frequently, but sometimes back in the day when I used to train, I used to run up and down these stairs. It was an endurance exercise. So running up and down certainly did build endurance. There's no doubt about that. And I was so glad when I was done running up and down these stairs. Any type of hill work, even running hills, didn't like that either, but it's part of the whole training program. You got to do it if you want to do any type of long distance running. So we're now at Davenport Road. Continuing down Spadina Road. And those are the Baldwin Steps. So the 127 Davenport bus has just come up north on Spadina and turning west on Davenport. Canadian Hearing Services. So I was having a bit of problems rather, my last video with the camera angle, so I apologize for that. But there is a way to switch the toggle from pivoting up or down and zooming, and I cannot seem to master that. So just a little while ago when I was stopped at the top of the stairs and tried to zoom into the downtown, couldn't remember how to do it, or I was doing it wrong. Anyhow, it's annoying. Toronto Archives. You can get all kinds of good information here. The Toronto Archives. Housing information. Good stuff there. Always liked this street. Busy, but not too busy. Maybe because it's fairly narrow. Here's Macpherson. So I am going to turn down Macpherson. I'm going to go west because these are the tracks. And if I went further south, that would be Dupont. So I'm going to stay north of the tracks. Or maybe it might be more interesting if I turn down. You know what? I'm going to go down Dupont. So I'm extending the perimeter walk just a wee bit of Casa Loma, but I think it'd be more interesting for you to see Dupont. It's a little busier. It is a major thoroughfare. If I went down Macpherson, it's pretty quiet. Mostly residential. Mind you, the Tarragon Theatre is, I think, on Macpherson. So this time 34 years ago, I was not yet employed. But I think I started interviewing about a week after I arrived in Toronto. And back then, I don't know, it didn't even faze me. I just knew that I'd find a job. It wouldn't be difficult. So I'm at Spadina and Dupont right now. And I'm going westbound on Dupont. So I wasn't worried about finding employment. I knew I'd find employment. I guess that's just the cockiness of youth. And then I got a job starting at the end of February. So I was just over a month in Toronto. So I did want to allow myself time to get settled, sort of feel my way around, not just jump into a job right away. We're at Dupont and Walmer Road, south. Looking south on Walmer Road. It is noisy. Oh, that looks pretty deep. What's happening here? What is being built here? Probably condos, right? Shouldn't have to ask. Probably condos. Yeah, so I found a job. So I had a month to kind of play around in Toronto and, get used to taking the subway and sort of figuring my way around. Then I did get a job working downtown Toronto, which is exactly where I want it to be. So I lived on Broadway Avenue. That's where I moved to after 6 weeks at a friend's relative's home. Had my little bachelor apartment, lived out of boxes because I didn't have a lot of furniture at all. But it was my place and I was totally fine doing that. totally fine, my little apartment, and living with the few things that I did. When I moved to Toronto, I went to, I think, Honest Ed's and picked up some knives and forks, like everyday knives and forks. That was before I started using, I used to have a good set of dishes and a good set of cutlery, and I brought those with me to Toronto. But, I was brought up where you only use those items for special occasions, when guests come over or there's a special occasion. Now that's all out the window. I utilize things that I like. Nothing is kept for quote unquote good, or for company, or for special occasions. But anyhow, yeah, so I bought, some essentials and set up my little apartment. Got familiar at least with line 1, the subway that goes downtown. I used to catch the subway at the Eglinton subway station, Yonge and Eglinton subway station, which I sometimes still do now, because I live sort of in that neighborhood, just a little bit further south. And, so I moved here when I was 29, so the people that I worked with, that crowd sort of tends to migrate together, right? Like you tend to, at least I found, sort of sticking with your age group. And it was about making friends. Work was sort of secondary. Socializing was always a priority. And I had a good time. I met some good people, and everybody was footloose and fancy free and single. So we used to go out a lot. Here we are at Howland Avenue, and there's the train tracks. And that's Macpherson just up there, I think. But I'm going to continue to go to Bathurst. And this is, like I mentioned, it just extends outside of the Casa Loma boundary. But I just think it's a more interesting street to be walking along. Oh, when did this go up? This looks new. It is new. I'm rarely down here. I really need to come down on Dupont. Yeah, so being here in Toronto at that age was perfect timing. I didn't think about it at the time. I think moving to a new city now, being single, might be a bit more of a challenge to meet people. When you're younger, I think it's certainly easier to make friends than it is when you're older. I think there are more parameters and maybe less interest in working hard to make friendships when you're older. Sort of set in your ways, set in your routine. But yeah, it was easy to make friends. It was just going out all the time. Guaranteed Friday night after work, hang out in one of the funky cool little restaurants in downtown Toronto where everybody else our age was hanging out. Just a lot of fun. The first couple of years in Toronto for me was a whirlwind in a good way. Here we're at Dupont and Bathurst. That's looking south on Bathurst. Now we are going north on the east side of Bathurst. yeah, it was a big whirlwind. Meeting people, going out. And I remember when I was going out, after I'd go home from work, and particularly in the weekends, I would drive to wherever I needed to go. Never thought about taking the subway. I don't know why. Maybe it's a Calgary thing. Because in Calgary, where I lived, it wasn't really, or where I lived before I moved to Toronto, it wasn't really a walking neighborhood like where I live today. And I wasn't comfortable taking transit at night, especially if I was going to a party or something. So I would drive and maybe pick up friends or meet people or whatever. Yeah, I used to drive a lot in Toronto when I first moved here. Those first couple of years I drove a lot until I finally dawned on me that the subway system, I felt very secure taking the subway because it was always busy. Unlike the Calgary transit system, the further I got closer to my home, the less people were on the bus, and I didn't feel so comfortable about that. But yeah, after about 2 years living here, I pretty much stopped driving because I was working downtown, and a lot of my friends sort of lived close to the subway line, and I lived close to the subway line, so the car just sat. Now, if you recall, if you've been watching my videos for a while, I did a whole Bathurst walk. Not a whole Bathurst walk, but a series of Bathurst Street walks. Probably a year ago, I think. And another celebration is this month. I think I joined YouTube in January, but I didn't do my first uploaded thing until February. So I'm coming up to 2 years of recording videos. I've got over 200 subscribers, so I want to thank all of my subscribers, all of my viewers. I have more subscribers than I have viewers. Hopefully that can change. I think about changing up my videos and how to make them better. Maybe more interesting rather, not necessarily better, but maybe a little bit more interesting. And I've said this before. Maybe doing a little bit more research as to where I'm walking and talk about maybe landmarks or specific buildings or something that would be of general interest. But the thing is, I often don't know where I'm going or where I'm going to record until sort of the day of. And I just sort of grab my camera and go, which leaves little to no time for anything, any type of deep dive into where I'm walking and what may be of interest. So here we're back on Davenport. So just looking eastbound, that's where I walk down the Baldwin Stairs. You can't see them from here, but just further down there. And sort of in that corner there, I think in there is Witchwood Park, or the neighbourhood of Witchwood. I did a video in Witchwood. It's a very kind of private little neighborhood, you wouldn't necessarily know it unless you don't necessarily drive by it either. It's sort of tucked away. You wouldn't really know about it unless you knew somebody who lived there, or somebody told you about it, or if you did research of Toronto neighborhoods. But just to come across it, you wouldn't necessarily notice it or find it. So it's supposed to rain tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. So I'm glad I'm out recording today. I recorded 2 videos on Monday, and one of them should be coming out tomorrow, which is Thursday morning at 10. And then the second video of that same day should be coming out maybe within a couple of days after that. And then this one hopefully will come out early next week. Here's Austion Terrace. This will take you, sort of curves around Austion Terrace. This will take you to Casa Loma, that street. So when I moved here, as I mentioned, I was getting familiar with the subway system. So I was taking the subway south, usually getting off at Eaton Centre, roughly, because that was a good landmark for me. And I had just caught the tail end of the previous subway cars. So subway cars that are in existence today came out less than 10 years ago, I think. And the cars before that came out, I think, in 1990, 91, around that time. So I had just caught the tail end of the earlier cars. So I've been through, this is my third iteration of Toronto subway cars. And those subway cars at the beginning, I think they were red. Or maybe I'm thinking of the Red Rocket. No, they weren't red. But anyway, they were not air conditioned. I don't know if there was heating. I'm sure there must have been heating, right? But I'm pretty sure they were not air conditioned, those cars. And of course you couldn't walk from train to train, like from train cab to train cab. I know you can do that in New York, but I've never known Toronto to have that access from train car to train car until, of course, this latest version of our subway train cars, where it's just one big long connected open train where you can walk from one end to the other. But I really like the sound of the subway cars. I like hearing the subway, and I would have no problem whatsoever to live like on the subway tracks, like live above the subway or right beside. We're close to the subway, but I could live even closer. I like the hum of the subway. I've always had a good experience with the Toronto subway system. There's something I find very soothing about the sounds that it makes. So we're at Howland Avenue, continuing north on Bathurst. So this perimeter walk is a longer walk. I try and keep my videos to maybe 30 minutes. But some videos are just going to go longer because of where I'm walking. And so this morning I thought I need to do this walk. It's just a good day to do it. It just, as I mentioned, takes me right back to when I arrived in Toronto, waking up the following morning. And it was great. I remember saying to my friend, it was later after I'd been here for a few weeks, and this is what Toronto looks like, as you know. For those who live in Toronto, it's grey. But at the time I was a bit disheartened by it being so grey, and it seemed bleak to me. But now, it's funny, you know, how much I enjoy. It's one of my preferred days when it's overcast and grey. How things change. Things change. This whole area has changed here. Well, this whole area, this corner has changed. It used to be a 7-Eleven right here at this corner.
Watch what you're doing.
And right across the street there, where you can see where it says Forest Hill Luxury Suites coming soon. Until recently, since what was on the corner here before was a car wash. I used to come here and get my car washed. And it was there up until I think a couple years ago, so it stood standing unoccupied for quite a while until they started to, I think they destroyed the building. They took down the building that was there. It was just a car wash. As you can see. And here is a notice. So it's going to be, you can see, I don't know if it's going to pick it up. Camera will pick it up. If I could properly zoom, I would zoom in. But it says here it's 30 stories, 944 residents, and room for 960 bikes, 531 cars. That notice was put up in 2020, June of 2020, but it's taking up a big chunk of space, that's for sure. So whatever is going to come here, and probably a bit to the north, and then this whole parking lot area.
I was just curious what that is.
It's a camera for recording.
Oh yeah? But it's like you can put it on the internet?
Yep.
Yeah, because I'm not familiar with technology. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, it's for a YouTube channel. I have a YouTube channel.
Oh really?
Yeah, it's called Boomer Girl Walking.
Oh.
because I'm of the boomer generation, right?
Okay, so like that's like it's better than using your phone.
It's well, the beauty of this is it keeps it steady. When you use your phone, you're a bit jerky sometimes,
okay.
right?
I've never seen this in my life.
Yeah.
Where do you can buy it
Just
in the
off
store?
of Amazon.
Really?
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
how much? Is it expensive?
Well, gee, I mean, how expensive is it? It's a few $100s.
Oh, okay.
Did you want to get past?
No, I was
That's
just
okay.
so curious. I said, well, I never seen such a small screen like that. No, I don't even. This is my technology. That's why this is mine. That's
Is that a flip phone?
That's why I was like, what is she doing? What is that? No, I'm like, I hate technology, and I was like, that's so strange because
I'm not much different than you.
Yeah.
My husband does all the technical. He does the uploading of the videos.
I hate it. It's like remember in the 80s you had the huge camcorder on your shoulder.
Do you remember?
Yeah. The
Yeah.
VHS thing.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now, like I'm looking at that, I'm like, wow. Like,
Yeah, things have come a long way, right?
I know, but you know what I think? I think they had it already years ago, but they hid it from society. I don't think I like. That's my theory.
I don't completely disagree.
Yeah.
But I do think that maybe some form of it was in existence.
yeah.
But it was used more for people in technology, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
Or the army was using it first.
Yeah, and it just wasn't probably proficient enough for the public to use it yet, right?
Because you know why? I'll tell you why. You know, remember that TV show, the cartoon Inspector Gadget?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
So you know, Penny, she had that book, and it was a book, but she opened it and it was a computer, beep 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 beep, and then she had a watch and she talked into her watch. So that was in the 80s.
Was that? Yeah, I don't remember that.
So like they
part,
were kind of like showing kids in the 80s that's going to be the future, but they like it's like it was like training us to prepare for us for it, probably.
Well, I think it's also good imagination, but I
don't think it was their imagination. I think they knew about it and they were slowly introducing it that way.
Yeah, that
like subliminally.
That, or it could be in part that they could see where it was going to take us.
Yeah, because remember she had that notebook with
that. I don't remember Penny. I just remember Inspector Gadget.
Yeah, the girl, his niece that lived with him.
Oh, okay. I didn't watch it regularly, so I'm not sure. But
watching episodes because when I see the note, I remember I said, "Oh yeah, her book was a computer." So like, but there were no laptops at the time.
No, that's true. There were not. Yeah, there were not.
Anyway, you're taking me on as well.
Okay. Yeah. Nice see you. Yeah. Nice meeting you. Bye. You too. Bye bye. All right. So somebody was just, I don't know how much the audio picked up on our conversation, but a lady that was heading here to the Loblaws was quite curious about this little camera of mine. I remember when this Loblaws was, so 30 years ago, this Loblaws existed, but not this building. There was a Loblaws on this ground. And there was a lot of parking, like just street parking. There wasn't the sort of the drive-through that you see here where it says customer parking. It was more exposed. And the Loblaws was only one floor. It was just, you entered from the ground. Here you enter from the ground, but you need to take an escalator to get up to the, up to where the groceries are. And then there's a second level. That's where washrooms, admin offices. I think there's cooking classes that are hosted up on the second floor as well. Yeah. Schoolyard. Yeah. So this apartment building that you can see where the camera is angling, I am on the north side of St. Clair walking east. So this tall apartment building, I remember, as I mentioned, I was staying at a friend's house when I first moved here, which is very close to where we are right now. And I would go, back then, those days, 34 years ago, rent control was a big deal in the city, and if you had a rent control building, you stayed there. you did not leave. And sometimes they would have what's called, I think, seed money. You'd have to pay off somebody if you wanted to get their apartment. They were moving out. I don't know, it was a big, that's what I heard. Anyhow, I couldn't afford to do any of that stuff. So what I used to do was, this is the middle of January, I would just go out on foot along St. Clair here and go into these apartment buildings and spoke to whoever I needed to. I remember there was a security guard actually at this building at 355 St. Clair. It was your concierge. He could have been like concierge / security guard. And I remember asking him, you know, what's the process to get an apartment in that building? I don't remember what the conversation was fully about, but I know that's what my question was. And then there were other buildings I walked along here. I think I brought my resume with me just to show that, I guess that was just my form of introducing myself. I can't remember, but so I was looking to find an apartment basically, and I went into many of these places that were apartments to see about a rental, because I wanted someplace that was very central, easy access to transportation. And of course my friend lived in the neighborhood, so it was good to be close to her, being that she was the only person I knew in the city. So I remember walking all along here and here. Yeah, I went down Walmer and Tweedsmuir. And then I sort of took the first apartment that came up, and that was the one at Broadway Avenue. And I preferred actually the Broadway Avenue one because at the time Broadway was just had mostly low-rise apartments. I think the tallest apartment was maybe 6 stories, 5 stories. It was a quiet street, unlike today. Huge high-rises are being erected on Broadway Avenue, and now Broadway is a one-way going westbound. It used to be a two-way. So folks, we started this video just across the street there. And here we are. We did a full circle, so to speak, walking the boundaries of Casa Loma. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you enjoyed this video. I so much enjoyed recording it for you and reminiscing a little bit about what the neighborhood meant to me and still does. A lot of fond memories of this neighborhood. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in my next video. This is Boomer Girl Walking, signing off.